So now we have Dr. Medina-Hernandez here. Once again, the title of your paper is Economic Justice Advocacy as Spiritual Activism. Please.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Well, again, good afternoon. My name is Daniel Medina-Hernandez, and I'm in Miami. I'm a PhD student at Nova Southeastern University, and my doctorate is in theology, and I'm an Anglican priest as well. What I'm going to be presenting to you this afternoon, for me, is where I believe the place of religion has to find its common voice and its common ground. The nature of discussing religion is often accompanied by foreboding. Many expect controversy. The adage that one should not discuss religion and or politics amid polite company is challenged in this paper. For most of the grievances expressed in religious controversy are attributed to theological sources. At least this is what is stated openly. Yet, masked behind the jargon of most religious rhetoric are innumerable cases of individuals or of communities hurt by that very same conversation. Truthfully, the material often discussed can be a source of exciting intellectual exercise, although some make allowances for sincere erudite controversy. Yet most anger expressed by parties in religious conflict is rooted in hurt, deep-rooted hurt, experienced by someone who sees the religious lessons or explanations imparted to them by respected persons in their lives as being deconstructed before them, as they usually stand impotent before the occasion. Having to concede another point of view as credible would require one has to recognize the explanations, treasured perhaps since childhood, as ignorant, superstitious, radical, or just downright wrong. One may recognize all this at an intellectual level, though, but there is an absolute refusal to accept material an outside individual or an organization presents if it does happen to hurt us at such an intimate level. We gladly expect others to subject their beliefs and attitudes to levels of scrutiny which we usually are not willing to endure ourselves. So as we fight the dissonance within to keep certain beliefs on a pedestal, we also grudgingly realize that in time we may have to take down them too. So these are the initial thoughts which resonate within me. And by the way, parentheses, I don't put a lot of slides up there. I'm not that comfortable with technology, and I would rather us just listen and think about what we're talking about. These are the initial thoughts, again, which resonate within me as I consider the task of addressing a seemingly external geosocial and political problem, which is economic disparity. Yet the nature of the inequality which has left billions without any basic resources for survival and has cost, if not more, in human lives, is ultimately rooted in the nature of the hurt of religious communities unwilling to practice the love preached, the peace expected, and the restraint its founders are said to have possessed in saintly amounts. So to question whether religion is a source of conflict is abrasive to so many people who believe religion is the salve for humanity's woes. Sadly, this is far from factual or true. The teachings of any religious system since time immemorial has upheld principles regarding the dignity of the created order and all life forms. It has clearly outlined the sanctity of life and that of the planet. It has illustrated the challenges divinity and humanity have experienced in relating to one another and those subsequent ramifications. So morality, ethical systems, and the expectations for every person to live in authentic and in intentional awareness of oneself before deity and among one's neighbors is indisputable. Hence, religion technically promotes peace, justice, reconciliation, egalitarianism, education, security for all persons, and opportunities to evolve as spiritual beings. Religion, therefore, hypothetically, promotes economic justice, as the economic system of any nation should guarantee the peace, justice, reconciliation, egalitarianism, economic and educational opportunities, financial and physical security for all citizens to evolve both as civil and spiritual beings. Religion is cultural for most of its adherents. It is the minority within every expression of the world's great religions that invests the personal time, the years, and reflection to arrive at a sincere personal statement of faith. This credo is the result of their heartfelt pain, of suffering, of joy, of uncertainty, and of the humbled arrival at a deep existential place of meaning and hope, the ground of all being, as it were. This may seem judgmental or perhaps even cavalier on my part. Yet I submit that if most individuals actually embodied their authentic credo, then the nature of the planet's conflicts take drastic turns for the overall well-being of all parties, for the environment, and the world over. So therefore, religious leaders are held accountable here, and we're called to be spiritual activists in every single expression of the world's faith systems found on the planet. No religion provides any ordinance for its subscribers to detach themselves from promoting goodwill, peace, and justice for all. Independent of the exclusive practices or methods found in the world's religions, the modalities of care are all rooted in unswerving ethical principles, expecting the faithful to embrace the conscientization of the inner self and of one's neighbor. One's neighbor depends on the faithful as much as the faithful are to do for their neighbor in their deity's name. When people suffer economic disparity and injustice, it is an indictment of the representatives of the faith they profess. Let me be clear. There is no question at all. Religion seeks to instill a yearning to love, to provide for the welfare and of spiritual evolution. The way of forbearance is also taught as a means of living within the means and to guarantee that all lives can pursue life and be blessed. For if they are, the testimony of their faith represented in any nation, region, or locality prospers because all see God in their midst. But what is religion? Religion, to define, is a challenge. The practice of religion is usually easier to illustrate than to describe the intangible nature of religion. An attempt can be made to integrate the predominant characteristics of most religions and what they share in common. But this would avoid bias and provide a coherent and integrated definition, which I believe will be useful for this presentation and for future work ahead. Religion, therefore, is a complex system available to human beings for achieving understanding, credulity, and fostering hope, as it concerns questions about divinity, existentialism, life, death, meaning, and the supernatural. Each system of religion attempts to afford adherence with answers, rationale, narratives, worldviews, and spiritual practices which serve to solidify, enhance, and clarify for the believer in any religious system the purpose for their lives, the nature of their relationship with others, nature, the universe, and if any, with the divine. Employing this definition for expectations all human beings should harbor for themselves, for others, and for the planet. This means that there is an inalienable dignity that all people should rightfully expect to possess and in turn be protected by civil society. Religious beliefs and teachings uphold the dignity of all people as an ordinance from God. Human beings selected, set apart, and trained to voice these teachings are expected to uphold these tenets and to advocate for them whenever they're at risk. But when we look at what is ethnicity, and my whole idea was putting this paper together to really emphasize ethnic religious conflict. What is ethnicity, though? Ethnicity is not easy to define either. In the United States, for instance, Hispanics represent a large and diverse ethnic group, but ethnicity also transcends race. According to a 2017 U.S. Census Bureau information pamphlet, ethnicity is not a race. And it's interesting because yesterday I was listening to the term white, and it's even broader. You can be white but be from the Czech Republic. You can be white and have your descendants from Germany. You can be white and have your descendants from Russia. And so in the United States, when we say the term white, we're actually thinking about one particular group that's responsible tacitly for colonialization. But the Czechs had nothing to do with that. So we have to be aware of the fact that sometimes when we look at someone who's white in the United States, I'm not white. And yet in Spain, I would be. So we have to keep in mind that ethnicity is a very complicated issue. So utilizing the example of Hispanic diversity, the Bureau explained that ethnicity determines whether a person is of Hispanic origin or not. So for this reason, ethnicity is broken down into two categories: Hispanic or Latino, not Hispanic or Latino. Hispanics may report as any race. It's a mess. Ethnicity provides diversity within the national boundaries of any country or territory. So the reality is that ethnicity is defined sui generis by every particular region in the world. So the difficulty with arriving at a consensus as to what ethnicity seems to be is almost insurmountable. But I would like to say that about religion as well. You know, when you hear the term religion, people even sometimes make the mistake of assuming that within one religious context, they're all religions. So you'll hear people, for instance, talk about Christianity and say that Baptists are a religion. They're not. Or that Presbyterians are a religion. They're not. These are traditions within a religion. As in Islam, not everyone believes in the very same perspective. There's different voices. In Hinduism, there are different voices. In Zoroastrianism, there are different voices. So it's very, very complicated, and we should be aware of that. Even within Santeria, there is different voices. So, additionally, comprehending the nature of ethnicity as a social construct sheds further light on the difficulty that we have even sometimes defining race. They're all intertwined. The integration of ethnicity and religion produces a sophisticated combination of heritage and history. Ethnic groups have as a part of their identity religious heritages and traditions, and not all members of ethnic groups share the same religious background. Now let's move over to talking about what are the sources of conflict. Johan Galton set before students of conflict a sobering challenge. So as we seek to analyze and comprehend the nature of conflict, we are also able to address what are the basic human needs which, if left unsatisfied, will fuel the conflicts we will later lament. Study and attempt as academics and as practitioners to remedy through diplomacy, international intervention, and sadly through war. But none of these avenues of resolution address the underlying long-term disparity and international complicity which over time provides the rationale for violence and the resentment that leads to confrontation. Economics, whose etymology is Greek oikonomia, encapsulates management of a household. So it suggests fiscal acumen expected for a home in order for it to be self-sustaining. So over time, the ideas of thrift, wealth, and household codes were incorporated. Civil society expects the institutions of a nation it represents to afford every citizen with peace, justice, reconciliation, egalitarianism, equal opportunity, and physical and financial security. But when these conflicts occur, there is an economy to blame. Across history, the lack of basic human needs has been the catalyst for conflict. So when nations undergo internal conflict with other nations, it's the lack of economic provisions that are caused by corruption and fiscal incompetence. There's other things that I'm going to put in the paper later on, but because of time, let me focus on something that I really want to emphasize, which is in essence the idea of my paper. Ethno-religious conflict are conflicts of identity. Within each country, citizens struggle to survive. Ethnic groups often seek to sustain their identities, traditions, culture, and languages. Alive in foreign countries, they seek citizenship and lay roots, but there is also an existential need to never sever the intangible, connections to the old country. So religion becomes a moral and theological underpinning to their existence. And so when we talk about ethno-religious conflict, what we need to understand is that in many cases, religion loses its existential place in faith, and it becomes a cultural center of identity. And when individuals are moving from one region that they call home and they seek to reestablish themselves in another place that seems to be, as the narrative in the Judaic tradition of exile comes, then they need to think about how they will sing sad songs by the rivers of Babylon. So when we understand that basic human need is not just found in the food and in the drink that we require, in the need for companionship and the need for love, but it's also in the sense of identity. And so it is important for us to understand that as spiritual leaders, it's not enough for just to listen to people and say to them, well, you should pray. And it's not enough for us to be able to tell people, go ahead and just in the better life, in the hereafter, things will get better too. Economic disparity motivates religion, but religion should also motivate economics. And this was one of the conclusions by Grimm, Clark, and Snyder in 2014. If spiritual activism commits to enduring perseverance, tasking the government and speaking truth to power to meet its civil obligations, then religious freedom is possible. We're living in a time where we can no longer have the division among leaders of faiths. We're living in a time where the term interfaith almost becomes a commodity. And if we're not careful, it's condescending. We have to be able to look no longer at comparative religions, but honor every religion for what it is, an expression of an existential need, and to work together for the common good of all people. Because in the end, all religions are fostering the same ethical precision and the same ethical principles. One of the reasons why I wear a collar is so that people can just not look at hope, but that people also look at the cause of much of their pain. And so it's important for us to understand that if we want to understand ethno-religious conflict, we have to make a point of educating one another of what this ethnicity is really about. But also spiritual leaders have a responsibility to step up and start living their faiths, not just in their communities, but crossing over into the unknown and learning about other faith traditions and walking alongside and expecting that the very same respect and desires they have for their people is also something that's going to be commensurate with other faith traditions as well. And with this, I'll complete and I'm done. Technology in the end is a mess for me anyhow. Governments are not solely responsible. The fragmented diversity of religion, even within religious faith traditions themselves, makes the ability for global accountability extremely difficult. Religions are divided unto themselves. How can we possibly expect to show that there is hope for a people and for the world, for the environment, and for overall sustainable needs to be met with full dignity of every living life and of the environment, if we ourselves are divided? So it's not just what we see in war, and it's not just what we see economically, dear friends, that I've listened to many of you speak over the course of these 2 days, but it's the war and the conflict within each and every one of us. If we really want to begin to work on this idea of resolving as successful mediators the ethnic, religious conflicts across our countries, within our neighborhoods and within our homes, it begins with an existential question of why am I in conflict within myself? And that I begin to live the example of the peace that I desire to see, as Gandhi once said. And that I am humble before other faith traditions. And that I understand that they have a lot to teach me. So it's not just what I impress upon people, but what can people impress upon me? That is the role of the spiritual activist. That's the role of the religious leader. It begins in our homes, it begins in our neighborhoods, it begins speaking truth to power, and it no longer can be where religion sides with politicians. Pulpits, temples, and sanctuaries are not for politicians to come and earn votes, people. Because we follow another human and another existential ideal. And so I leave you with this idea. that although global religious systems may or may not share similar theological views, it is a secured path to mutually assured conflict and violence if the intolerance towards dialogue and sharing of resources, support, and advocacy is sustained. The economic disparity will continue, and as it further diminishes, the basic needs of all people, regardless of a religious identity, will suffer the consequences of scarcity, poverty, inequality, illness, war, and civil unrest. Let us be the light that we claim to have, and let us be the source of transformation that we desire. God is greater than everything we could ever possibly imagine. Blessings and thank you.